Всем привет! Today I would like to tell you about Russian traditional housing, how Russian traditional houses where people lived till the Soviet Revolution lived, how they were named, how they looked like, how the accommodation looked from inside. The name of traditional Russian hut is izba. Izba is the wooden house, wooden hut, and it could be building or chamber or a large house complex with 4 walls. And it was heated by a cooking stove. Cooking stove was very important, the most, I guess, important part of the house, the heart of it, mostly for the northern regions, of course. And also because of the climate, the izba was built high off the ground. So what does it mean? That means that cellar was extended about 1 or 2-3 meters above the ground. And this bottom part under the house, it wasn't for living, it was used for storing food or supplies. It could be basement or some cellar, so it could be partly dug into the ground. But at the same time, in the south, earlier houses could be built directly on the ground because it was warmer there, and the floor was actually the earth itself, so it was lined with straw or hay, and sometimes it was covered with planks. But later, everywhere in Russia, houses with cellars became common, and the type of izbas with earth floor almost completely disappeared. But yes, before it used to be also pretty common if the climate was suitable for that. Usually these huts, izba, were built exclusively from wood, and the method how they were built without nails was called corner cutting. What does it mean? That means that carpenters, they stacked logs on top of each other. So in one log there was a cup. They cut out a cup about 20 centimeters from the end, and this cup was semi-cylindrical, and it was corresponding to another log joined to it at a right angle. So they were put one into another, and in the square shape, making a square shape of the hut. Roofs of izbas, they were usually covered with wooden plates. In southern regions, more common could be roofs made from straw. And of course, since the ancient times, house owners have strived to decorate their homes. They carved wooden objects, some geometrical or floral patterns. Also, the stoves themselves also can be painted with some bright designs. Talking about the territory, usually the izba had yard next to it, and welfare or middle class peasants usually kept horse stable, barn for cows, for some other farm animals. They had hay shed, storage rooms for grain, for other supplies. They could kept their tools in the yard, and they parked carts and sleighs under some roofed shelters. And in northern Russia, the yard usually could be connected to izba under one roof. So all the buildings, they were like a part of one big covered area. In the south, everything was usually separate, with just a woven fence around it, showing that this is a one complex, a one territory with one owner family. I mean, talking about the interior of izba, the ceilings in the rooms were usually low. In the middle of the ceiling, there ran a thick wooden beam. It was called matitsa in Russian, and it held up the ceiling boards. And this beam was also like a secret part of the home. So people carved some protective signs, the names of the family members who had passed away on it, and they also could hang baby's cradle using this matitsa. And the beam also was like an invisible line of the hood, so it could separate room, like separate on two parts. For example, one part could be for guests and another part just for living and for some domestic stuff. Most of houses usually consisted of two rooms. There was heated living part and a cold part, an entryway, which in Russian is called seni. And people needed it in their houses to separate warm area from the street. And it was used also to store some equipment, some provisions, kept water in tubes, cool some food, and some to store some outwear, some shoes, for example. And in the summer, if it was hot, owners could sleep in the entryway in seni. And in the winter, if there was too cold, they could keep the animals, some animals, if they needed protection from cold, also in this entryway. The warm part of the hood, it was the part where family members ate, slept, cooked, had a rest, would have some guests. It was about, usually, of course it could be different, but in general it could be about 20-25 square meters. And usually from 7 to 10 people could live in izba. Usually the space was divided into women's and men's parts, and each part had their own space for sleeping, eating, for leisure, for household. And when people weren't working outside, usually women spent their time spinning thread, sewing clothes, and men usually wove baskets, for example, or they could fix their tools. And also, some hoods who could afford it, they had the part for guests, which I told you about before. In Russian, this like clean part where people just have fun or don't do some domestic stuff, it was called горница. So that's where guests were welcomed, where everyone gathered around the table, and they could sit, chat, eat together, and all that stuff. Talking about the furniture in the hood, it was divided into portable and permanent. It could be installed, the permanent one could be installed as soon as the house was completed. So, for example, long benches along the walls, shelves for dishes, some sleeping platform, or usually it could be benches for sitting themselves. They all were immediately attached to the log structure, but portable furniture in the hood could include table, also some other type of benches for table, for example, to sit in front of the table, some chests for storing different clothes, shoes, blankets, and chairs, for example, it was very rare for traditional Russian household. And the most important thing of the izba, a large stove, it was usually placed in the corner, but in northern regions it was right at the entrance, I guess because of the cold, logically. And in the south it was the opposite way. The stove was about 2 meters long, with a flat bed on top, where usually could sleep elderly people or little children, if it was cold, for example. Also, I read about some way how people could use oven, not just for cooking into it, but for example, if someone got a cold and felt sick at night, this oven, it wasn't so hot, but it was hot after the working day, a little bit hot. People put straw inside of this hollow part where they usually cook, and person laid there, so with legs there, with head out of it, well, I mean closer to the out of it, and they slept there. They sweat a lot during the sleeping, but it was warm. They all were in the warmth of this oven, and in one night they get well after this. So that's very interesting. I really would like to try, but I don't have such an opportunity. And until the 18th century, craftsmen built houses without a chimney. So such houses were called kurnaya izba. It means smoky izba, because when the stove was lit, smoke filled all the room and then escaped through a special hole in the ceiling or just out of the open door. And because of this, after some time, everything in the izba became covered in soot and furniture, dishes. They had to be cleaned frequently. Also, I guess there always was this smell. And I already told you about different types of banya in Russian. There was a white banya, белая banya, and a black banya, черная banya. The black one worked the same way. There was no tube, and all the dust, all the smoke was inside, and that's why it was black. It was just black inside because of this. And it was in very old times, and later people just started doing everything in a white way because it was safer, it was cleaner, healthier, and I guess here it works the same way. Another important part of the interior of the hut is the red corner. It was located diagonally from the stove, and it's not literally red. In ancient Russian, red meant the word krasny, which now means red. Before it meant beautiful, and so it was like beautiful corner where it was biggest, cleanest, the most elegant part of the house, and it was the corner of God, where usually was some icon, one or several if the family could afford it, and there was. It stood on a shelf covered with special white embroidered towels, which were called ruchnik, if say more in more correct way, rushnik. And they also hang some lamp oil. So usually people prayed there or crossed themselves and so on. And Russia used to be a pagan country till the 10th century, but since the 10th century it became Christian. When someone entered the home as a visitor, they had to cross themselves at the red corner, and also nearby stood a long dining table, and all the family could gather there on weekdays or on holidays, and guests too. Usually huts were lit using torches. In Russia, these were long, thin pieces of wood, usually made from birch or aspen trees. And one or more of these torches were put into a special holder called svetinka. Usually the torches, of course, provided just dim light, so all the housework was done before dark. And peasants rarely used expensive candles, of course, mostly just on holidays. But in the middle of 19th century, kerosene lamps appeared in Russia, and after this, they were used for lighting homes until the advent of electricity. And now I would like to tell you about Another type of Russian houses izba, it was more for usual people, for peasants, but richer families, they lived in another type of house, which is called terem. It's bigger, it's richer, more decorated, and usually have several tiers more than izba. In ancient times, terem was not a house actually, but the top floor of a fancy Russian house where lived women. And there were, it was like a small lookout towers. So, like, bored young women, they could watch what's happening outside, or if their groom is coming to see them, to talk with their family or something like this. And if the family was rich enough, the terem could have a balcony or a railed walkway, so girls or women could take a walk without having to go down into the yard. But later, terem became a beautiful wooden house, and usually there is lots of carved decorations, intricately shaped roof, and an ornate front porch. Terems unfortunately fell out of fashion during the reign of Peter the Great. So it was in the 18th century when Russia began to build according to Western models, because Peter the Great wanted to make Russia more trendy, more modern, more Western. And yes, because of this, Russia really got great progress, but at the same time, in many spheres, Russian culture lost its personality really seriously. And something later got back, but something was like completely lost even. But luckily, talking about terems, they regained popularity in the beginning of the 20th century because there was a wave of general interest in national architecture. So most of the terems we can see nowadays, they stayed since that period of time. And of course, there are new ones, but now in Russia, it's not so popular to build something like this. So in simple terms, terem is an ancient Russian equivalent of Western cottage or some luxury mansion, for example. Terem, it's an always tall house which had several floors or tiers, and unlike modest hoods, the towers were generously decorated with some open-work carvings, frames, beautiful shutters, roofs of intricate shapes and something like this. And the interior design of terem reflected its dual nature. So on the one hand, it served as a living space, but at the same time, it was a place, ceremonial place with a high status for high, important, and rich guests. The central space in the terem was bright chamber, a room with large windows to let inside plenty of light. This was the place where a household could spend time, received guests, and hosted some family celebrations. The furniture there was usually also simple. It can be decorated, but in general it was simple but useful. For example, also white benches, they also ran along the walls, like in izba. People sat on them during the day and slept on them at night. And above the benches, there were shelves for dishes, for tools, for books, for example. And of course, like in regular hood, there was the red corner. Maybe it was just more decorated. In fancy rooms, there could be carved chairs, benches with headrests, the tables for sewing, for writing, for example. Women also often had their own special spot by the window because there was more light, and they could sew there, did some lace work or read, for example. And Usually the terrain also, of course, was heated by a stove. It was set on a lower floor, so like in the basement, and warm air from it traveled up through special pipes or channels into the rooms above. And sometimes some homes they put in separate stoves, and they were covered with very colorful decorations showing patterns of pictures from old folk tales or from some legends. So that's were two the most popular types of living in ancient Russia and Russian Empire till the Soviet Revolution. I hope that this video was interesting for you, that you learned a lot. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know how did you like it. And пока-пока.